We have all heard the phrase, death is just the beginning. But what if it's not just a cliché? What if death is not an end, but the transition, the threshold, between two chapters of a grand eternal story? For centuries, cultures across the globe have spoken of the journey after death, describing it not as an abrupt stop, but as a passage, a transition from one reality to another. The ancient Egyptians, whose understanding of death was far deeper than most modern minds can comprehend, mapped this journey in sacred texts, the Egyptian Book of the Dead being one of the most important. In this text, they described the soul's passage through a series of gates, each representing trials of judgment, purification, and transformation. The soul was not simply judged for its deeds in life, but was tested for its ability to cross into the next realm. Death, in the Egyptian worldview, was not to be feared. It was a process of becoming, of merging with the divine, of returning to the source. These afterlife maps, recorded in sacred texts across cultures, share a common theme: that death is not the finality we are taught to fear, but a continuation of the soul's journey. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo offers a similar map, guiding the soul through the bardos, intermediate states between death and rebirth. There, the soul faces its attachments, desires, and fears before it can pass on to its next incarnation or find liberation. The Greeks, too, spoke of the journey of the soul, where the spirits of the dead would travel through the underworld to be judged, and those deemed pure would enter the Elysian fields, a place of peace and renewal. In every ancient culture, death was not an ending, but a passage into another form of existence. But there's a catch. To understand death, we must first understand life. Death is a continuation of life's process, not an isolated event. The maps left by the ancients teach us that the way we live determines the way we die. The choices we make, the energies we align with, the way we live in harmony with our soul, all of these affect our journey after death. If we live in alignment with our true nature, we will pass through the gates of death as easily as we pass through sleep. In the Egyptian teachings, the soul's journey after death is anything but straightforward. The Book of the Dead lays out a map of trials that the soul must face, and they are not just external challenges, but internal ones. The soul must navigate its own darkness, its own desires, and its own attachments. It must confess its wrongdoings and seek redemption before it can move forward. But the beauty of this system is not in the judgment itself, but in the opportunity it provides for the soul to purify itself. The most famous trial in the Egyptian afterlife map is the weighing of the heart. The heart, believed to be the seat of the soul, was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart was heavy with sin, with guilt, or with attachment, it would be devoured by Ammit, the demoness of the underworld. But if the heart was light, the soul could pass freely into the next realm, where it would merge with the divine, achieving eternal life. But what does this really mean for us today? The ancient Egyptians understood that death was not an escape from life, but a continuation of it. The choices we make in life, the way we carry our energy, the way we hold on to grudges, fears, or unhealed trauma, all of this shapes the journey we will take after death. We cannot outrun the consequences of our choices. Just as in the Egyptian tradition, the soul must face its own heart, its own truth, in order to move forward. The same concept exists in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Here, the soul is guided through the bardos, states of consciousness that lie between death and rebirth. In these realms, the soul encounters its own projections, its desires, and its fears. The texts describe how the soul is pulled toward the light, but not all lights are the same. Some are deceptive, illusions that lead the soul back into another cycle of life. Only those who can recognize the true light, the true nature of consciousness, can escape the cycle and achieve liberation. The key to navigating these realms is awareness. The soul must awaken to the truth of its own nature. It must recognize the illusions, the attachments, and the ego-driven desires that kept it bound to the material world. In both Egyptian and Tibetan traditions, the soul's journey is not just about external tests, but about an internal awakening, an awakening to the reality of who we truly are, beyond the body, beyond the mind, beyond the ego. And this is the lesson for us today. Life and death are not separate. They are part of the same journey. To prepare for the afterlife is not simply to fear death, but to live consciously, to release attachments, to seek truth, and to align with the divine. The more we align with our soul's true purpose, the more we awaken to the reality of who we are, the more we will pass through death with ease and grace, just as the ancients have always shown us. The path through the afterlife is not merely a process of moving through different realms or facing judgments. It is a profound journey of self-discovery. Both the Egyptians and the Tibetans understood that the soul must confront its own limitations in order to transcend them. This journey is not simply about passing tests. It is about unburdening the soul of everything that weighs it down. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the soul must navigate through the Hall of Judgment, where it faces the gods and the truths about its life. The soul's journey is one of purification, an unraveling of the ego's attachments and the emotional baggage that was carried throughout its earthly existence. It is the process of shedding the false self, the self that identified with material things, with desire, and with fear. This is not a punishment. It is a gift, an opportunity to finally become free. Similarly, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the soul experiences the bardo, a liminal state where everything familiar fades away. The bardo is not just a realm between life and death, it is a reflection of the mind itself. In this space, the soul faces the projections of its own consciousness, the fears, desires, and attachments that were never truly dealt with during its life. The bardo is an intense mirror that reflects the soul's unresolved emotions and thoughts. It is a space where liberation is possible, but only if the soul is able to see through the illusions and transcend the ego's grasp. What these ancient texts teach us is that death is not a moment of passive transition. It is a process of awakening. The soul's journey after death is the ultimate reflection of the journey we take in life. The more awake we are to our true selves in life, the easier the transition will be when we pass. But this requires conscious living, a dedication to releasing attachment, to understanding that the things we cling to in this life are temporary. Our true essence, our connection to the divine, is eternal. The maps left behind by the ancients show us that we are not just bodies, and we are not just minds. We are souls, eternal beings of light, truth, and consciousness. To understand death, we must understand that we are not simply our physical form. We are not the sum of our actions or our past. We are consciousness itself, moving through time and space, learning, evolving, and awakening. And this understanding doesn't end with death. The ancient texts tell us that life, death, and rebirth are part of a greater cosmic flow. We are all part of this flow. And just as the soul passes through realms of judgment and purification in the afterlife, we must engage in the same processes during our earthly lives. We must purify our hearts, heal our emotional wounds, and awaken to the truth of who we are, so that when the time comes to cross the threshold, we do so not with fear, but with peace and understanding. One of the most profound insights shared by the ancient texts is that death is not a linear journey, but a cyclical one. In the Egyptian tradition, the soul's passage through the afterlife is not just an isolated event, but an ongoing process. Life and death are intimately connected, and the way we live directly impacts the way we transition after death. The concept of the soul's eternal journey is fundamental in these ancient teachings. The idea that death is merely a pause in the grand, never-ending process of becoming. The same theme is echoed in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The soul, upon leaving the body, enters into the bardo, a realm between lives. Here, it encounters its own consciousness, its own projections, and its unresolved attachments. The bardo is not a single experience, but a series of states that mirror the soul's mind. The clearer the mind during life, the smoother the transition through the bardo. But if the soul is clouded by fear, attachment, or confusion, it will struggle to pass through the barriers to freedom. What this teaches us is that the way we live, our thoughts, our emotions, our spiritual practices, all play a significant role in shaping our experience after death. Just as in life, the choices we make create our reality. The clearer our perception, the less we carry with us into the afterlife. The more we live in alignment with our higher selves, the easier the journey will be when we pass on. And conversely, the more we cling to the material world, the more we hold on to fear, guilt, and attachment, the more challenging our transition will be. This cyclical journey is also reflected in the idea of reincarnation, a concept that has been embraced in many ancient cultures. The cycle of birth, death, and rebirth is seen not as a punishment or a curse, but as an opportunity for the soul to evolve, to release past attachments, and to move closer to its divine nature. The soul is not bound to the material world forever. The more it learns, the more it sheds its limitations, until it eventually reaches a state of liberation. But liberation is not achieved through force. It is achieved through awareness. Just as the soul must remember its true nature in the afterlife, we must remember who we truly are while we are alive. This process of remembrance is not about accumulating knowledge or adhering to a particular set of beliefs. It is about awakening to the truth that lies within. It is about realizing that we are not just bodies, not just minds, but eternal beings of consciousness. When we begin to live with this awareness, we start to release the fears that bind us, the desires that distract us, and the attachments that keep us in the cycle of suffering. We start to live with a sense of purpose, not as victims of circumstance, but as sovereign beings, guided by a deeper truth. And when we do, the experience of death becomes nothing to fear. It becomes just another step in the eternal journey of the soul. The ancient texts don't just teach us about what happens after death, they teach us how to live before it. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and even the ancient Greek texts that describe the journey of the soul offer us insights into how we can prepare for the transition and, in turn, how to live more consciously and fully while we are still here. One of the most striking pieces of wisdom that comes from these texts is the emphasis on the importance of living with awareness. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it is said that the soul must have true sight in order to pass through the gates of judgment. This sight is not physical vision, but spiritual insight, the ability to see beyond the material world, to understand the deeper truths of existence. The soul must know itself, its true nature, and have let go of the distractions of ego, attachment, and desire. Similarly, in the Tibetan teachings, the soul is encouraged to develop a strong, clear mind before death. The Bardo teachings emphasize that the clearer the mind at the moment of death, the smoother the transition will be. The more we can quiet the noise of the ego, the more we can navigate the afterlife with grace. The teachings suggest that we practice awareness in life so that when we die, we are not caught off guard by the illusions of the bardo, but are able to recognize the true nature of reality, and through that recognition, achieve liberation. This awareness doesn't come easily. In both the Egyptian and Tibetan traditions, there is a strong emphasis on preparation. The Egyptians believed that the soul must go through purification before it can pass on. The Tibetan Book of the Dead encourages practitioners to prepare for death through meditation, mantra practice, and visualization, practices that sharpen the mind and strengthen the soul's connection to the higher realms. These practices are not just for the moment of death, they are for life. They prepare us to see life and death with clarity, without fear, and with full awareness. The key, then, is to live consciously. The more aware we are in life, the more we can navigate the mysteries of death with ease. When we live with awareness, we shed the illusions that keep us bound to the material world, and we begin to see the deeper layers of existence. We begin to recognize the interconnectedness of all things, the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth, and we move through it with grace. The more we practice awareness, the more we begin to see life as it truly is, not as a series of random events or a struggle for survival, but as a journey of the soul, a journey that continues beyond death. We start to understand that death is not something to fear, but something to embrace, for it is not an end, but the next chapter of our eternal story. And so, as we peer into the afterlife maps left by the ancients, we realize that the greatest secret of all is not in what happens after death, but how we live before it. The wisdom of the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't just for those who have passed on. It's for those of us who are living with the awareness that we are, in fact, eternal beings. The transition after death is not a destination, but a continuation of a process we are already part of. Every moment of our lives matters, every choice, every thought, every action. The more we understand this, the more we live with purpose. The more we live in alignment with our soul's true nature, the more we shed the falsehoods of the ego and the distractions of the material world. We begin to embody the truth that the ancients knew so well, that we are not here by accident. We are here to remember, to awaken, and to realize our divine essence. So, as you continue on your journey, whether it be through life or the transition into the next world, know that you have the power to navigate it with grace and with awareness. The maps have already been drawn. The paths have already been illuminated. All that remains is for you to walk them, to remember the wisdom of the ancients, and to live with the knowing that life and death are but two sides of the same coin. And now, as you finish this video, remember, this is just the beginning. The truth of the afterlife is not something far away. It is something that is unfolding in every moment. The more you awaken, the more you align with your true self, the clearer your path will become, both in this life and beyond. If you're ready to continue on this journey of awakening, I invite you to take the next step. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Share with us your insights, your experiences, or any questions you may have. Because this journey doesn't end here. It's only just begun. We are all on the same path, walking toward the same truth. Together, we awaken. Together, we ascend.